In the heart of the New Testament, we find 12 ordinary men who followed Jesus Christ and transformed the world. They are the 12 disciples. First, we have Peter, a fisherman by trade, who would become the rock on which the church was built. Then there's James, son of Zebedee, a passionate man known for his fiery temper. His brother John, often referred to as the one whom Jesus loved, penned the Gospel of John, 3 epistles, and the book of Revelation. Andrew, also a fisherman, was the first disciple to follow Jesus. He's known for bringing others, including his brother Peter, to the Messiah. Philip, hailing from the same town as Andrew and Peter, was a conduit for Greeks who wanted to meet Jesus. Bartholomew, also known as Nathanael, was a man of integrity and honesty, praised by Jesus for his lack of deceit. Matthew, a tax collector despised by many, authored the first gospel. Thomas, often remembered for his doubt, was equally characterized by his deep devotion and desire for truth. James, son of Alphaeus, is often referred to as James the Less to distinguish him from James, son of Zebedee. Thaddeus, also known as Lebbaeus or Judas, son of James, is famed for his heartfelt question to Jesus in the upper room. Simon the Zealot, likely a political activist before he met Jesus, was transformed into a passionate follower of Christ. Lastly, Judas Iscariot, the disciple who betrayed Jesus, played a pivotal role in the events leading up to the crucifixion. These were ordinary men called to an extraordinary mission. They came from different backgrounds with different strengths and weaknesses, yet they were united in their commitment to follow Jesus and spread his message. Each of them, in their own way, contributed to the establishment of the early Christian community. Now, let's delve into the scriptures that reveal their lives and transformations. The Bible, specifically the New Testament, gives us a vivid portrayal of the disciples. As we delve into the scriptures, we encounter the lives of these 12 ordinary men who were chosen by Jesus to carry forth his mission. They were not saints from the start, but individuals with human frailties and struggles. Let's start with Peter, one of the most prominent among the disciples. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 22, verses 54 to 62, narrates a crucial point in Peter's journey. After Jesus' arrest, Peter, filled with fear, denied knowing Jesus thrice. But this is not where Peter's story ends. In the book of Acts, chapter 2, verses 14 to 41, we see a transformed Peter. He's no longer the fearful denier. Instead, he boldly stands up in Jerusalem, proclaims the resurrection of Jesus, and becomes a pillar of the early Christian community. This stark contrast in Peter's character shows us that even in our failures, there's room for growth and transformation. Next, we have Thomas, often labeled as Doubting Thomas. The Gospel of John, chapter 20, verses 24 to 28, tells us about his struggle with doubt. When the other disciples told him that they had seen the risen Lord, Thomas couldn't believe it unless he saw Jesus with his own eyes and touched his wounds. But when Jesus appeared and invited him to touch his wounds, Thomas's doubt turned into a profound confession of faith, "My Lord and my God." This narrative teaches us that it's okay to have doubts. Doubts, when approached rightly, can lead us to a deeper understanding and affirmation of our faith. And then we have Matthew, the tax collector. His story is found in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 9, verses 9 to 13. As a tax collector, Matthew was despised by his own people. But Jesus saw something in Matthew that others didn't. He saw a man who, despite his past, had the potential to follow him. And Matthew did follow. He left his old life behind and became a disciple of Jesus. Matthew's story is a powerful reminder that no one is beyond the reach of God's transformative love and grace. These are just 3 examples among many. Each disciple, from James the Zealot to Judas Iscariot, has a unique story that resonates with different aspects of our human experience. Fear, doubt, betrayal, zeal, loyalty, and transformation. As we read these verses, we can see that the disciples were not much different from us. They had their moments of doubt and fear, they made mistakes, and they learned from them. But amidst their struggles and victories, they were being shaped and transformed by their relationship with Jesus. The disciples' stories are an invitation to us, an invitation to delve deeper into our own faith journey, to confront our doubts and fears, to acknowledge our failures, and to allow ourselves to be transformed by our relationship with Jesus. These verses show us that the disciples, like us, had their share of failures and victories, but through it all they were transformed by their relationship with Jesus. Despite the clear biblical accounts, there are several misconceptions about the disciples. One of the most common is the belief that these 12 men were perfect or even superhuman. But let's take a moment to debunk this notion. The Bible, in fact, paints a rather different picture. It shows us that the disciples were ordinary men with ordinary struggles. They were fishermen, tax collectors, and zealots, not saints or scholars. In the book of Mark, chapter 9, we find the disciples arguing about who is the greatest among them, a far cry from perfection indeed. Another misconception is that the disciples were always faithful and never doubted. Yet, in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14, Peter, one of the most devoted disciples, momentarily loses his faith while walking on water and begins to sink. Or consider Thomas, often dubbed as Doubting Thomas, who refused to believe in Jesus' resurrection until he saw it with his own eyes. These instances underscore the humanity of the disciples, their doubts, their fears, their imperfections, but at the same time they also highlight the transformative power of Christ. Simon, a volatile fisherman, became Peter, the rock upon which Christ built his church. Saul, a persecutor of Christians, turned into Paul, one of the greatest apostles. Another common misconception is that the disciples were all men, but the Bible tells us otherwise. In Romans chapter 16, Paul sends greetings to a disciple named Junior, who he refers to as outstanding among the apostles. This clearly indicates that there were indeed female disciples, a fact often overlooked or misunderstood. In debunking these misconceptions, we're not undermining the disciples, but rather emphasizing their humanity. They were real people with real struggles, transformed by their encounters with Christ. Understanding the true character of the disciples can help us see that they were real people with real struggles and real victories, just like us. The lives of the disciples serve as both an inspiration and a challenge to us. They were ordinary men, fishermen, tax collectors, and zealots who were called to an extraordinary mission. They walked in the footsteps of Jesus, experienced his ministry firsthand, and were transformed by his teachings. These men, who were once so ordinary, became extraordinary vessels of God's love. They spread the good news far and wide, faced persecution, and many even gave their lives for the faith. Their stories are not just historical narratives, but real-life examples of faith, obedience, and transformation. Let's take a moment to reflect on the Bible verses we've explored today. As you read and meditate on these passages, remember that the disciples were real people with real struggles, doubts, and fears, yet they were able to overcome these through their relationship with Jesus. Their stories are a testament to the transformative power of faith in Christ. Think about Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times, yet was forgiven and became a pillar of the early church. Or Matthew, a tax collector despised by many, who left everything to follow Jesus and later wrote one of the Gospels. These are not just stories from the distant past, but lessons for us today. We can learn so much from the disciples' journey. Their faith, their mistakes, their growth, all of these aspects of their lives are deeply relatable. They show us that no matter our past, no matter our mistakes, we too can be transformed through a relationship with Jesus. So let's not see the disciples as distant figures of the past. Instead, let's see them as they truly were, ordinary people who were profoundly changed by their encounter with Christ. Let's learn from their experiences, draw strength from their faith, and be inspired by their transformation. Remember, just like the disciples, we too are ordinary people called to an extraordinary mission. May their stories inspire us to follow Jesus more closely.
I'll